A friendly internet community where the vloggers are kind, the gamers are cool, and mysterious fanflicks flash past the screen as we all pretend to sleep. Welcome to YouTube. Today I want to tell you a story. So, are you sitting comfortably? No? Then I'll begin. It was in the middle of winter, when the broad flakes of snow were falling around, that a certain queen sat at a window, the frame of which was made of fine black ebony. As she was looking out upon the snow, she pricked her finger, and 3 drops of blood fell upon it. Then she gazed thoughtfully upon the red drops which sprinkled the white snow, and said, "Would that my little daughter that might be white as that snow, and red as the blood, and black as the ebony of the window frame?" And so the little girl grew up. Her skin was as white as snow, her cheeks rosy red as the blood, and her hair as black as ebony. And she was called Snowdrop. But this queen died, and the king soon married another wife, who was very beautiful, but so proud that she could not bear to think that anyone could surpass her. She had a magical looking glass, to which she used to go to and gaze upon in herself and say, "Tell me, glass, tell me true, of all the ladies in the land, who is the fairest? Tell me who." And the glass answered, "Thou queen art fairest in the land." But Snowdrop grew more and more beautiful. When she was 7 years old, she was as bright as the day and fairer than the queen herself. Then the glass one day answered the queen, when she went to consult it as usual, "Thou queen mayest fair and beauteous be, but Snowdrop is lovelier far than thee." When she heard this, she turned pale with rage and envy, and called to one of her servants, and said, "Take Snowdrop away into the wide wood, that I may never see her more." Then the servant led her away. But his heart melted when she begged him to spare her life, and he said, "I will not hurt thee, thou pretty child." So he left her by herself, and though he thought it was most likely that wild beasts would tear her into pieces, he felt as if a great weight had been taken off his heart when he made up his mind not to kill her, but leave her to her fate. Then poor Snowdrop wandered along through the wood in great fear, and the wild beasts roared about her, but none did her any harm. In the evening she came to a little cottage and went in there to rest herself, for her little feet would carry her no further. Everything was spruce and neat in the cottage. On the table was spread a white cloth, and there were 7 little plates, and 7 little loaves, and 7 little glasses with wine in them, and knives and forks in order, and by the wall stood 7 little beds. Then, as she was very hungry, she picked a little piece off each loaf, and drank very little wine out of each glass. And after that she thought she would lie down to rest. So she tried all of the little beds, and one was too long, and another was too short, until, at last, the 7th suited her, and she lay herself down and went to sleep. Presently, in came the masters of the cottage, who were 7 little dwarfs that lived among the mountains, and dug and searched for gold. They lighted up their 7 lamps, and saw directly that not all was right. The first said, "Who has been sitting on my stool?" The second said, "Who's been eating off my plate?" The third, "Who's been picking at my bread?" The fourth, "Who's been meddling with my spoon?" The fifth, "Who's been handling my fork?" The sixth, "Who's been cutting with my knife?" The 7th, "Who's been drinking my wine?" Then the first looked around and said, "Who's been lying on my bed?" The rest came running round him, and everyone cried out about someone that had been upon his bed. But then the seventh saw Snowdrop, and called to his brethren to come and see her. They all cried out with wonder and astonishment, and brought their lamps to look at her, and said, "Good heavens, what a lovely child she is!" And they were all delighted to see her, and took great care not to wake her. And the seventh dwarf slept an hour with each of the other dwarves in turn, till the night was gone. In the morning, Snowdrop told them all her story, and they pitied her, and said if she were to keep all the things in order, and cook, and wash, and knit, and spin for them, she might stay here where she was, and they would all take good care of her. Then they all went out for their long day's work, seeking gold and silver in the mountains, and Snowdrop remained at home, and they warned her and said, "The queen will soon find out where you are, so take care and let nobody in." But the queen, now that she thought Snowdrop had been dead, believed with certainty the handsomest lady in the land, that she went to her looking-glass and said, "Tell me, glass, tell me true, of all the ladies in the land, who is the fairest, who?" And the glass answered, "Thou queen art fairest in all the land. But over the hills in the greenwood shade, where seven dwarfs their dwelling have made, there is Snowdrop hiding her head, and she is far lovelier, O queen, than thee." Then the queen was very much alarmed, for she knew that the glass always spoke the truth, and was sure that her servant had betrayed her, and she could not bear to think that anyone lived who was more beautiful than she. So she disguised herself as an old peddler, and went on her way over the hills to the place where the dwarfs dwelt. Then she knocked at the door and cried, "Fine wares to sell!" Snowdrop looked out of the window and said, "Good day, good woman. What have you to sell?" "Good wares, fine wares," said she. "Laces and bobbins of all colours." "I will let in the old lady. She seemed very good for a sort of body," thought Snowdrop. So she ran down and unbolted the door. "Bless me," said the old woman. "How badly are you laced? Let me lace them up with one of my nice new laces." Snowdrop did not dream of any mischief, so she stood up before the old woman. But she'd set to work so nimbly and pulled the lace so tight that Snowdrop lost her breath and fell down as if she were dead. "There, an end to all thy beauty," said the spiteful queen, and went home. In the evening the seven dwarves returned, and I need not say how grieved they were to see her faithful Snow White stretched upon the ground motionless, as if she were quite dead. However, they lifted her up, and they found what the matter was. They cut the lace, and in little time she began to breathe, and soon came to life again. Then they said, "The old woman was the queen herself. Take care another time, and don't let anyone in when we are away." When the queen got home, she went straight to her glass and spoke into it as usual. But to her great surprise it still said, "Thou queen art fairest in this land, but over the hills, in the greenwood shade, where seven dwarfs their dwelling may have made, Snowdrop is hiding her head, and she is far lovelier, O queen, than thee." Then the blood ran cold in her heart with spite and malice to see that Snowdrop still lived, and she dressed herself up again in a different disguise, and took a poisoned comb. When she reached the dwarf's cottage, she knocked on the door and cried, "Fine wares for sale!" But Snowdrop said, "I dare not let anyone in." Then the queen said, "Only look at my beautiful combs," and gave her the poisonous one. It looked so pretty that she took it up and put it on her hair to try it. But the moment it touched her head, the poison was so powerful that she fell down senseless. "There may you lie," said the queen, and went on her way. But by the good luck the dwarves turned very early that evening, and when they saw Snowdrop lying on the ground, they thought about what had happened and soon found the poisoned comb. And when they took it away, she recovered and told them all what had passed. And they warned her once more not to open the door to anyone. Anyone. Meantime, the queen went home to her glass and trembled with rage when she received the exact same answer as before. And so she said, "Snowdrop shall die if it costs me my life." So she went secretly into a chamber and prepared a poisoned apple. The outside looked rosy red and tempting, but whoever tasted it was sure to die. Then she dressed herself up as a peasant's wife, and travelled over the hills to the dwarf's cottage and knocked on the door. But Snowdrop put her head out of the window and said, "I dare not let anyone in, for the dwarfs have told me not to." "Do as you please," said the old woman, "but at any rate take this pretty apple. I will make it a present for you." "No," said Snowdrop, "I dare not take it." "You silly girl," answered the other, "what are you afraid of? Do you think it is poisoned? Come, do you eat one part and I will eat the other." Now the apple was prepared so that one side was good, though the other side was poisoned. Then Snowdrop, very much tempted to taste, for the apple looked exceedingly nice, and when she saw the old woman eat, she could not refrain from eating herself. But she had scarcely put a piece in her mouth when she fell down dead upon the ground. "This time nothing will save thee," said the queen, and went home to her glass, and it said at last, "Thou queen art fairest of all the fair." And her envious heart was glad, and as happy as such a heart could be. When evening came and the dwarves returned home, they found Snowdrop lying on the ground. No breath pressed her lips, and they were afraid she was quite dead. They lifted her up and combed her hair and washed her face with wine and water. But all was in vain, for the little girl seemed quite dead. So they laid her upon a bier, and all seven watched and bewailed her 3 whole days, and then they proposed to bury her. But her cheeks were still rosy, and her face looked just as it did when she were alive. So they said, "We will never bury her in the cold ground." And they made a coffin of glass, so they might still look at her, and wrote her name upon it in golden letters, and that she was a king's daughter. And the coffin was placed upon a hill, and one of the dwarfs always sat and watched, and the birds in the air came too, and bemoaned Snowdrop. First of all came an owl, then a raven, but last came a dove. And thus Snowdrop lay there for a long, long time, and still only looked as though she were asleep, for she was even now as white as snow, and as red as blood, and as black as ebony. At last a prince came and called at the dwarf's house, and he saw Snowdrop and read what was written in golden letters. And he offered the dwarfs money and earnestly prayed to let him take her away. But they said, "We will not part with her for all the gold in the world." At last, however, they had pitied him and gave him the coffin. But the moment he lifted it to carry it home with him, a piece of the apple fell from between her lips, and Snowdrop awoke and said, "Where am I?" And the prince answered, "Thou art safe with me." And then he told her all that had happened, and said, "I love you better than all the world. Come with me to my father's palace, and you shall be my wife." And Snowdrop consented, and went home with the prince, and everything was prepared with great pomp and splendour for all the wedding. To the feast was invited, among the rest, Snowdrop's old enemy, the queen. And as she was dressing herself in fine, rich clothes, she looked in the glass and said, "Tell me, glass, tell me true, of all the ladies in the land, who is the fairest? Tell me who!" And the glass answered, "Thou queen art loveliest here, I ween, but lovelier far is the new-made queen." When she heard this, she started with rage, but her envy and curiosity were so great that she could not help setting out to see the bride. And when she arrived and saw that it was no other than Snowdrop, who was, as she thought, had been dead for a long while, she choked with passion and fell ill and died. But Snowdrop and the prince lived long and reigned happily over the land for many, many years. That was the story of Snowdrop by the Brothers Grimm. And now, the weather.
A gentle breeze from Hushabye Mountain softly blows o'er Lullaby Bay. It fills the sails of boats that are waiting to sail your worries away. It isn't far to Hushabye Mountain, and your boat waits down by the quay. The winds of night so softly are sighing, soon they will fly your troubles to sea. So close your eyes on Hushabye Mountain, wave goodbye to cares of the day, and watch your boat from Hushabye Mountain sail far away.